Get this show on the road. You're muted.
Oh, I was saying I was just watching the Heather show. I mean, the tunes were jamming. Heather's dancing. Folks are trickling in. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our final day of the Digital Credential Summit. Woohoo! I'm seeing if you were here at the end of the day yesterday, we talked about a possible cute animal contest for today. So I see I brought my teddy here, and I see some other pets in the backgrounds there. But
I brought my formal one. He's even wearing his tie for the occasion.
That's fantastic. Well, we'll have to leave time at the end to see all the cute animals. But for now, let's get started. So we're wrapping up day 5. The recordings are on the playlist and are going up on the website. Come on into the Slack channel to see what we've been up to this week. Here's your little Zoom tips. And we will have the conversation going. I put the links in the chat. Let me know if I need to put them in again, because today we're talking about university connections. And so we're gonna hear from some folks that are leading some initiatives that relate to digital credentials and will be involving digital credentials, but form some deeper connections between us all. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over the Xplor team to give them plenty of time as they go first.
Good morning, everybody. Another day at the Digital Credential Summit. Good to be here. I want to just take a couple of minutes to provide a little history to Xplor, because I think it's relevant to understand what Xplor is and what we are trying to achieve, where this might be going. And so let me start with saying that 3 years ago, both the Herberger Institute for Design and the Arts as well as the College of Health Solutions were on a separate but similar journey to develop a digital learning system in support of our leadership's key initiatives. Due to the similar challenge and really the synergy that we had, it made sense for us to come together, partner to advance this work that we were doing. And so why, or to say, what were we trying to do? Well, to put it this way, to push forward design and arts-led social transformation, to create a new type of leader that could have true impact in the community, in the world, to be a translation point in culture, or for that matter, in healthcare, to support workforce development, to create leaders in respective fields. We needed a system that had the power to do that. That is to say, to bring, laxly put, the outside world to our programs, but in a way that wouldn't just extend reach, because we're doing that already, but that would merge, fuse fields, enabling a dynamic exchange between these different facets, students, faculty, then outward-facing field experts, companies, nonprofit communities, you name it, and really empower the learner to discover, take control, and really chart their own course, their own learning journey. And really with that, elevate interdisciplinary learning. And one important aspect of that, of course, was to bridge in an effective way and in a usable way, knowledge and skills gaps. So I should say this is an evolutionary process that we're involved in. Xplor is evolutionizing as we are speaking right now. While we started with artists and designers, our use case, healthcare workers, what we were trying to solve, of course, was applicable to different other units, colleges across the universities. There were other folks looking at this, and definitely a lot of folks that probably would like some of what we were doing solved. And so really with the support of the Learning Futures Collaboratory, it helped us advance what we were doing expand our partnerships to get input from other colleges, academic units, but also input from key departments that had import, that had knowledge, know-how to help us, including at Plus. So we've gotten it to a point now where we're really excited about it because we think it has a lot of import to what we're doing. This whole last week, we're talking about credentialing. Well, this relates to this because it's empowering that, the very fact of what you can do with credentialing. So I want to briefly talk about the key design tenets of Xplor. So learners as explorers. That's simply personalized learning, allowing the learner to access, discover knowledge, providing him or her a way to set their own path, but in a meaningful and relevant way for them, custom, right? And it's really providing the learner tools and agency in a prescriptive way, in a very powerful way, even associated or connected to artificial intelligence in its full ended state, but also in a self-driven way with a powerful user interface showing, visualizing domains of knowledge that the user can have access to from different entry points. So both of that was of importance. Learners as creators, by design, every user in Xplor has access as a learner and a creator. You're both, well, and it's removing traditional barriers and promoting democratization of learning. And then, of course, learners as a social act. Learning this is having a community, a network of content contributors, and exchange, which doesn't only involve learning peers, but also mentors, advisors, in some cases, the very experts that are known, maybe even worldwide in the field and having access to that, creating this cauldron of learning to occur. And on this next slide, if you want to advance this, I'm not going to spend much time on it. Folks that are within the ASU community recognize this very readily. These are the learning realms, President Crow's learning realms. For folks who are outside of the ASU community who are looking at this summit, this is to say that Xplor touches on all the learning realms, or that is to say that any user, no matter what life stage they're in, can make use of Xplor and find a meaningful way to chart a path forward. With that, I want to turn it over to CR so he can talk a little bit more specific about user cases showing how the system or who the system will serve. CR, if you want to take it from here.
Of course, yeah, it's a broad and vast system with a lot of power, but it's a lot easier to understand if we look through the eyes and experiences of actual users of Xplor. So we introduced to you Sandra, who's in healthcare, and she's a manager currently, but she needs to upskill. She wants to add some skills to what she's doing, and Xplor provides the roadmap for her to acquire those new skills. In her case, she wants to learn more about quality assurance and quality improvement so that she could then apply for a new position within her organization. This Xplor helps her to utilize that the roadmap and make her way toward that new position. Next, we have Jorge. Jorge has been out of school for a while. He is in a position now where he's decided that he wants to engage in learning again, engage in courses and other learning materials. And Xplor provides the ecosystem that visually visually presents his own personalized pathway, how he can take next steps, what resources are available to him, and he can construct that pathway so he can achieve the goals that he is set for himself. Lana is in high school. She has gotten lots of experience through her different engagements with institutions and her other work in the community. And this helps her to review what she's learned and prepare for job interviews. and identify ways in which she can transfer her credits and also develop connections using the Trusted Learner Network as the basis upon which to make those connections. And then we have our very own Toby kid. As a college student, he was noting that he had in music, as a music student, he had learned lots of different skills. And as he was trying to think about ways to supplement the work that he was doing in his prescribed field, he wanted to get a job somewhere else. And he was trying to figure out ways to, how can I communicate the transferable skills I've got to get a job that could utilize those skills that might be outside of my particular area, my particular field. These are just a few of the stories. What we're wondering is, do any of your stories, and you can use the hand raising device, do any of your stories resemble some of those, where having access to a robust system that would have helped and guided you would have been useful to you in your past experience?
Thank you, CR.
Yes.
So yeah, it's something that definitely hits very personally for me, not just the work that we're doing in the micro-credentialing space here at ASU, but particularly Xplor, because I can see how it applies to me personally. And, you know, as CR said, I'm sure a lot of you out there can as well. So we'll check back in and see how many of you, just leave your hand raised as I'm going through. So now that we've had a couple examples of learners in the system, let's walk through what this might look like from a user interface perspective, what the experience of a learner might be, and to kind of highlight some of the power that we're bestowing upon the learner in this experience. So at outset, a learner coming into Xplor from whatever direction that they are on their current learning journey, current student or an outside audience, maybe a member of a partner who is also engaging in putting content into Xplor, they might just be presented with a simple search screen. And this is one of the key powers of Xplor that was mentioned earlier. Learners are empowered to decide their own learning journey. So as an example from the College of Health Solutions, we might see that you search for patient care. And there are 12 results. We can only show 4 because of the size of the slide. But imagine here that we have a number of, these are a number of pathways related to patient care from within the College of Health Solutions. But these could also be listing pathways that are available through a third-party healthcare systems network provider. So if there was a partnership with the College of Health Solutions, then that creation of content and the promotion of that content through Xplor now makes it available as a potential learning opportunity for learners that are coming into the system. And now, before I go any further, this is a learner dashboard, but I do want to say these examples don't actually represent pilot content. These are just samples so we can highlight the functionality of the system, but it doesn't mean to imply any content that exists for this purpose or any partnerships with any outside organizations. So if you look at this first example, Anthropology 101, that's just a normal college course. I think we all know what that looks like. It's sequential. They're completing this in a different environment, having these credentials listed here. Makes total sense, I think, for all of us from the conversation we've been having this week. But now we see that we have a veterinary tech pathway that's offered by an external organization. There's a lot of power here now for a learner who can look and see all of their in-progress learning opportunities, deciding which one they want to focus on and engage with. One of these might have been pre-prescribed. Anthropology 101 is probably part of a degree program, if I had to guess. And that ability to say that you're completing this one, but also engaging in other areas of personal betterment and education. And I think that this is where this particular chart helps to highlight how we have multiple networks of content that are being pulled in. As Rowan mentioned earlier, all users are learners and creators. Anybody can see public content that is placed into the system and create content themselves for that democratization piece. But also we see that there are institutions here, because institutions exist for a reason. Accreditation is a thing. There are certain protocols within certain industries or certain employers even for how they want to train their employees or even potential employees. So if you look at this, the first column, Arizona State University, this is a general representation of ASU, but as we've talked throughout the week about the types of issuers and who can issue, who should issue, this wouldn't necessarily be ASU proper. This might be ASU College of Health Solutions. This might be ASU Herberger Institute, ASU Sustainability, ASU Library System. All of these would be listed as an issuer within this platform. But to use examples from both CHS and HIDA, in the Herberger Institute, we have community-based arts organizations that we partner with to generate content and make that content available to our learners here at the Institute, but also to unique communities that are out there, working artists out in the world right now, sometimes geographically located. And also with the healthcare systems network example, this could be that training program where somebody is being sent to Xplor to complete a professional development opportunity to upskill in order to build themselves in the next level of their career. And one final category, which I think is really awesome, and that we have a particular use case for in HIDA, is this individual content contributor. It's really, in some ways, an organization of one, or maybe a couple people. So the idea here is in the Herberger Institute, Rowan mentioned, we have these unique content experts that are coming in from all over the place. They're being brought into the Herberger Institute to share this truly unique knowledge with our student population. And these nationally known experts have this content. Specifically, the example that comes to mind is Liz Lerman and her Atlas of Creative Tools. She is a perfect use case and would have benefited greatly from having Xplor available to her as something she can push content into and then deploy across all these domains of knowledge holders, so that an ASU student can be completing a degree and at the same time connect with training and learning opportunities in community-based arts organizations, healthcare systems networks, individual contributors, and also even unverified content if they were choosing to do so. This slide is one that we have seen a few times throughout this presentation. It's one of the pilots from the Herberger Institute for the Design and Arts Corps. And, referencing some of the issues that were mentioned earlier in this, or I'll get to that in just a second, but the idea here is that we're basing this all on existing technology. This comes from Badger Pathways, but we're adding in that next level of technology and support for a learner in a way that's not currently evident in any system that we have found out there. And so at its outset, it is two things. It's both exploratory and pre-prescribed. We have skills-based exploration, which connects related skills and competencies, like what was mentioned by Mark and Katrina for their pilot with CHS. Displays credentialed modules across ASU and even across other organizations and issuers, so the learner is truly taking control of their own learning journey. And with all of this access to information and data, we can start to incorporate things like machine learning and building an intelligent user profile that truly gets at who this learner is, what they've been engaging in, how they've responded to this content, what kinds of things are they good at, what kinds of things do they need for their career or for their personal betterment and their own personal education. And using that to make artificial intelligent recommendations so that this can function in a really autonomous way where a learner can be given access to some things like, you did really well at this, maybe you should consider another one, or you really enjoyed this module by this content expert. Here's another opportunity to learn from that expert as well. So we're truly trying to transform this disparate landscape of digital credentials into a single cohesive network of opportunities for the learner. And with that, I think it's time to turn it over to Heather and Dan so we can get kind of a current status of where Xplor is at ASU.
Hey all. Everyone has mentioned that Xplor is still in the discovery phase, right? So we just finished sort of architecting what the system could be, how it might function, how it might be white labeled, how it might work inside of ASU and sit beside other sorts of organizations that would be working within this. But right now we have really focused on the learning enterprise, which you have heard about earlier this week from Kim Merritt, and the idea of how could that serve as maybe a first pilot for inside of ASU as a way to move forward some of the work that Xplor has been doing. So we are currently looking at that, and the idea would be that hopefully some portion of Xplor would be part of the launch of the Learning Enterprise in the fall. Obviously, it really matches well to what is happening right now with the Learning Enterprise and them wanting to better serve the lifelong learner and display to them their needs across their entire learning journey. So it really seemed like a really nice match. So right now we're working through what all of that means and what the real, getting down to the P's and Q's and dotting the I's and crossing the T's to see how that's gonna roll out. But we're really excited about having a first pass at an internal go at this. And I'm gonna ask Allison to say a few words about, what would it take to get content ready to be in a system like Xplor, let's say.
Sure. So what I think is really interesting, having worked on Xplor and then watching the digital credential pilots is, Xplor was born out of a need to make it easier to partner with external partnerships, but also through the pilots, we've seen how important it's going to be to help support internal collaboration within the organization. Some of what we heard about yesterday with the libraries and some of the questions about, okay, well, how do students get in there? How do faculty see what students have completed? Would be answered by this system, right? And some of the collaboration that has come up in the work groups of like, okay, well, we're all doing faculty professional development. How can we exchange and, create pathways using each other's content? It's going to help with that as well. And so creating content to go into the system is really the first step. And that does not need to exist, as we've seen, the system does not need to exist before we start working on that content. So mapping out those skills, finding what would you want to credential, what would you want to put on a pathway and put into the system to contribute to the community. So starting to think about and build that content is really the first step, because if we build a system and we have no content, then why do we need the system?
If I can just jump in there as well and just say that the work that's begun, it has a trajectory that it's on and quite a heavy lift to get that started. But the more that we look to the next stage, which is really where we start to think about the recommendation engine that sits at the front end of this, and the intelligent pathway mapping that needs a machine learning platform to really drive that. We know that even in early conversations that we've been having with vendors that can provide that they can offer some of that technology to help us with the early uplift as well. So as we try to think about ways of getting content in the system quickly, some of those machine learning tools that scan the context and content of what we already have give us a chance to quickly upload and add content into this system. So this is not probably in the current status piece, but it's interesting how as you look forward to how this system will evolve and we add that recommendation engine, some of the things we can learn there can be backward mapped to where we are now to help us. So I'm very kind of optimistic and excited about how we solve the recommendation engine piece and how that might help us with what we're trying to achieve right now.
Wonderful. So we've got some questions in the chat. Abigail asked if the stepping stones on these pathways could be online or in person. Does it all have to be digital? And Toby, you already answered, but I want to see if you wanted to speak more to it.
Sure. Thanks, Allison. Yeah, everything, anything that has a digital credential attached to it can be listed in Xplor. The specific requirements for achieving that credential or participating in that modular opportunity would be listed in the enrollment process for that experience. But it could be something that is in person, again, as long as you are connecting it back to a digital credential somehow that can be listed in Canvas or otherwise so that it can be pulled into Xplor.
Oh, go ahead.
Go for it.
No, I was going to say, because there's another piece about what's the vision for revenue generation. The idea is that Xplor isn't the LMS. It isn't the place that's doing the collecting of fees. It isn't the place that's doing the admissions. What it is that learner experience overlayer that sort of connects all of those pieces together. Much of that work is actually happening, you know, we're still putting badges in Badger and pathways in pathways, right? We're still going to put content in a learning management system, whether that be Canvas or edX or whatever system it currently exists in, or whether it's a corporate LMS potentially at some point. The admissions will still be done on the admission side. This is really for a user to understand what's potentially available, to build those pathways for themselves, and then see a common place for a record of those digital credentials that shows their progress. So it's not actually performing every function along the way. It really sits as this consistent user interface layer over the top of everything else.
Wonderful. Dan asks, is Xplor looking for partners?
We're always looking for partners. Please let us know.
Can you speak to what the vision is regarding revenue generation? If we were to utilize a badge from someone else's college or vice versa, how is the college compensated for the use of their content?
Yeah, so as we said before, for revenue generation, it's about access to that badge, right? So if you're going to give access to a particular piece of content with a credential at the end, or experience with a credential at the end, that would be governed by whatever college or unit was already offering that. So it wouldn't be revenue transfer across those units. Each would be still doing their own revenue generation. Now, that being said, system's not built. So we don't actually know exactly how all of the actual front end pieces are going to work for revenue generation for each individual group. Some might make some revenue generation pieces and collaborate on that. We just don't. We're not at the build stage yet. But the idea is that Xplor itself would not be the collection piece for the money.
Perfect. Can someone petition to be credentialed for an experience they have gone through that isn't currently credentialed? For example, if they present at a conference, could they write a proposal to get a badge for that? And I'll kick off speaking to that a little bit. I see Toby like virtually pointing at me. I would say that that's up to the issuer. You know, that's whoever is kind of controlling that experience. So for example, like with this conference, that would be up to us at UTO. So I think that's really kind of on a case-by-case basis. Anyone else? Any other thoughts on that?
No, that would have been what I would have said too. It's up to the issuer. You would have to find an issuer who had a credential or who offered credentials similar to that you could actually work with them to see if that would be something they would accept.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a good example of that in, if we look at the existing pilots that we have already. We have, I didn't get a chance to talk through this in the presentation because I was trying to get through it, but we have pilots right now going on in CHS and HIDA and in the library system that are all looking at, that might all be looking at similar skill sets, where we're trying to look at maybe equitable communication as an example could be present in all three of those pilots. And the ability for a learner then to look and see, well, I'm already completing something about this particular skill or competency. Is there a way that I can pull that into my existing pathway in another program? So a double major, or maybe somebody who's taking an elective course that's giving them that opportunity anyway. That's an internal conversation we can have at ASU to say, well, hey, I've already got this. Is there any way I can not have to do that same work twice to make it more efficient, both for the institution and for the learner?
I want to look at the chat because Sequant has come in and said a possible use case would be the experiential learning network, which we presented on Monday. And I think that would be an amazing use case from the academic side. And I can't wait to work with Sequant and the Provost's office on that, because I think that that's really how we can get to the point of having both pilots in not only the non-credit space, but also the for-credit space. So that's a great option. And thanks for throwing it out there, Saquon.
Yes, that is very exciting. And it would be a great step towards building this library of choices that Debbie put out there. And so if Xplor is a way to get, connect learners with learning experiences, what happens after the learning experience is over? And I think this is a great time to pass it on to Michelle, talk about the Trusted Learner Network.
Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, let me get my screen up here. I was thinking myself how appropriate it is that we're talking about the Trusted Learner Network after talking about a tool for really reviewing all the different options. Now, once you've chosen something and earned it, then what? So, all right. So I've enjoyed all week listening to other presenters and love the format that's going on right now. So I thank you for tuning in and for being part of the energy behind creating this future for empowering students to both acquire and then share their credentials. I'm Michelle Watt, and though I'm the product manager in UTO for the TLN, I'm also a member of a large team that spans departments within ASU and also includes external partners who are all focused on this work. So before moving on, I want to point out the web address on this first slide, trust.asu.edu. That's where you'll find some of the information and artifacts I'll be discussing about the vision for the Trusted Learner Network, which we typically refer to as the TLN. So this is a great resource for sharing with others who you think may also be interested in this work. I've divided the presentation into 3 sections today, and they resemble the 3 sections we find helpful in our day-to-day TLN conversations. We're frequently jumping from the current work that we're doing in progress to how it aligns with our vision and the long-term goals, and how we're laying some of the groundwork to attack future challenges that are not right yet in front of us. So one of the challenges we even have when we're collaborating is saying, hold on, wait, which part are we talking about? Is this work right now, or is this talking about a future idea? So first I'll be sharing information about the long-term vision for the Trusted Learning Network. So what is the TLN? I'll give you a moment to read the definition on the screen. And just note the words secure and decentralized, recording, curating, and sharing, and that the data will be used across the learner's lifespan. If we compare this to a system we all already know that stores learning credentials, that could be ASU's transcript system. And students are able to, it is a secure system, students are able to share those credentials either unofficially by printing it out themselves or officially by requesting that the university officially share a copy of that. And the records do go back really far. I've learned a lot working with the registrar's office. It's pretty impressive, the type of data that can be still represented. But some of the differences include this idea of decentralization, and putting a little more ownership for the learner in recording and curating those and determining how they're shared, and even the wider variety of information that would be part of the TLN. So I want to talk a little bit about 3 different components. So first of all, trust is an important component of the network. While each institution in this network of institutions would have the ability to issue their own credentials, so they must be issued in a way that others can trust they are valid. Underlying technologies like a cryptographically secure distributed ledger, which you'll soon be able to define, can enable this higher level of trust. And second, the record needs to be flexible enough to include a wide variety of accomplishments. Course grades and degrees are a starting point, but the data has to be, the data model has to be designed to align with a wide variety of accomplishments, including the ones we've been talking about this week, individual badges, pathways, and even broader types of accomplishments. So for example, as we design the data model, we've also been looking to the IMS global standards like open badges and the comprehensive learner record to make sure that the data model is interoperable, because we can't have much of a network without partners, and the ability to to share and represent a wide variety of learning accomplishments. And finally, by establishing a permissioned network, a variety of organizations can participate in both the technology and the governance for the benefit of individuals as they progress between organizations in lifelong learning pursuits. I am a huge fan of ASU. My first degree was from ASU, but I have degrees and accomplishments that have been awarded by other institutions as well. And that's me as a learner, and I want to be able to represent those. So, so there needs to be a way to have organizations working together to, for the benefit of students. Even though it is a network of organizations issuing credentials, the vision includes the learner at the center, owning the capability to access and securely share verifiable learning achievements with others. So for just a moment, imagine yourself as the learner in this picture and all the types of experiences and achievements that have contributed to the skilled professional you are today. Imagine how you might use the TLN when representing your skills and experience to a future graduate program, a future employer, or even something that's top of mind right now, maybe a service organization looking for volunteers to meet some of the challenging community needs we have. All right, next. I loved Toby's poll earlier, so I'm going to ask you to participate in a poll. And this poll is asking how familiar you are with blockchain technology. There's a broad spectrum of choices. Never heard of it can absolutely be the option you choose, all the way to some have accused me of being Satoshi Nakamoto. He was the anonymous or the pseudonym for the inventor or group of inventors of Bitcoin, the blockchain network. So maybe that's what you identify with. There is a lot of difference between I have a basic understanding and some have accused me of being Satoshi Nakamoto. So definitely don't feel free to shy away from that top category if you do feel like you have more than a basic understanding. Great, I'm excited to see that a lot of people do have a basic understanding. So then some of the things we were talking about how trust as an underlying framework of the TLN is really a game changer. Great. Thanks for playing. So blockchain is a type of distributed ledger technology, and it means that unlike having a centralized database that's one source of truth, every node in the blockchain contains a live, complete, and writable version of the database. That's very different from the ASU student information system that stores transcript data. So while Bitcoin is an example of a public blockchain network, and anyone could become a node on a public blockchain network, what we're talking about with the TLN is a permissioned blockchain network. So nodes would be other organizations issuing their learning credentials. However, whether it's public or private, the secret sauce of blockchain is that the transactions are recorded in a way that's secure and tamper-proof. So if you have a basic understanding, this diagram will make some sense to you. It really just shows how transactions are grouped together into blocks, and then through an algorithm, a hash is created that represents the data in that block. If even a bit of that data is changed, then the hash would no longer be accurate. So that shows that the data has not been changed because the hash represents these are the transactions that were in this block when it was created. And then each block is chained together because the next block says, I come after the block with this hash. So that's why it's blocks that are put in a chain and can be highly trusted because of the cryptography that's involved in creating the data in the first place. So very different from a traditional database. All right, so how do we keep this in mind as we look at the TLN vision? We have 12 guiding principles of the TLN. And we keep these principles in mind as we design, develop, and iterate the architecture for the product. I promise I'm not going to go into detail about all 12, but I did want to speak to a few of them. The first two principles, immutability and statefulness, they seem contradictory. So the nature of a blockchain provides immutability in that once something's written to the chain, it can't be removed, it's there. However, statefulness acknowledges that there may be reasons for something to no longer have a current state. And a great example is a credential that expires, or maybe a course grade that needed correction once it was written to the blockchain. So through human error or whatever. So both are important for trust and accuracy of the system. In addition, as we think about the learner being at the center of the vision, they need to be able to exercise some ownership in how their credentials are shared, including consent and respect for privacy. Our idea of ownership also includes the possibility of attaching artifacts to credentials. So even though ASU is issuing a degree or a digital credential, a student may want to also link that to a portfolio item saying, this is a representation of the learning that I achieved through this credential. And then I'll be expanding on the idea of identity and governance in our future challenges section. So as we do our work towards that vision, we think of the work as being in horizons, with some of them right in front of us and some of them further down the road. So now I'm going to transition into talking about a horizon that is right in front of us, and that's our reverse transfer application. So reverse transfer is that idea that it's the practice of a student transferring from a 2-year institution to a 4-year institution and only having earned a certain number of credits from the 2-year institution, but not actually achieving a degree like an associate's degree. Sometimes they have been just on the cusp, or maybe only had a couple semesters worth of credits. Either way, the reverse transfer practice, through student consent, the 4-year institution would share back learning achievements or courses and grades and credits earned with the 2-year institution. And at the appropriate time, the 2-year institution who's been monitoring that progress can reach out to the student and say, hey, you're eligible for an associate's degree. Would you like to have that on your transcript now and be awarded that? And it's exciting because it's a benefit for the 2-year institution because they're able to show their contribution towards a student's achievement of a degree, but also for students and 4-year institutions, there is data showing that some students who achieve that 2-year degree on the way to their bachelor's are more likely to continue on and achieve that. So we're working right now across ASU. This effort is a collaboration between UTO, EdPlus, and the University Registrar Academic Alliances. And we're also working with Maricopa County Community College District. That's our current 2-year institution partner. And Salesforce is a co-development technology partner with us. So based on input from our university registrar and the MCCCD administrators, who will be the first users of this pilot, we have some really rough mock-ups designed that will not only improve the timeliness of data access, but also reduce the amount of time that either side is spending. So we expect to eliminate the time our university registrar needs to spend on collecting and disseminating this data for reverse transfer, and then streamlining the process of accessing and evaluating the data at the community college. Just briefly going to put up a picture of some of the architecture. This is really just to illustrate the fact that we have to be really flexible about what we're building. So right now, our partner Salesforce is still working on developing and certifying their blockchain to be able to support PII information. So in the meantime, we're learning about the front end, the APIs, all those things as we connect to a database with plans to move to that blockchain. And even further down the road, there are other technological advancements that we'll need to stay agile in order to incorporate those as we go. So we're collaborating in this work with partners from ASU, including the academic alliances. We're working to develop a process and relationships for future onboarding of additional community colleges for the purpose of reverse transfer. This work actually dovetails very nicely with the work their office is already doing to pursue their vision of creating transfer pathways for students to ASU from every community college across the nation, which is about 1,150. So working closely with stakeholders within ASU and Maricopa has informed the MVP that's currently in progress, but it's also helping us to generate a backlog of additional improvements for future iterations so that this becomes a valuable tool for those future partners. All right, so now I'm going to transition from the work that's right in front of us to some of the future challenges that are a little further a future horizon, including this idea of identity and digital identity. So to fully realize the vision of an empowered learner at the center of this network who has the ability to share verifiable learning credentials, we have to move beyond identity as we currently know it to what some have called a new personal digital identity. This identity has to take into account both selfness and whoness. Selfness is the state of being you. You're still you, even though you may be perceived differently by different organizations. But whoness is the other end of the spectrum of identity in that it's a single impression of a person. So, for example, we all have the whoness of being employees of ASU. Some of us may also be current or former students of ASU, which is a different whoness attached to our own selfness. So one way that, how did I get, okay, hold on, let me back up. All right, so we have a couple existing paradigms of identity that are getting us a little bit closer. On the left, you see the account-based identity model where you have one account connected to one organization. And we all know the frustration of a million different passwords because you have that one account for that one organization. Something that gets us a little closer to combining all of our different whonesses with oneself is this idea of a federated identity model. So single sign-on is an attempt at that. When you use Facebook or Google to create an account at a new website so you don't have to remember the new password, that's another step closer. But there still is this centralized identity provider. It's not yet more of a distributed system of identity, which is a future model that's being worked on right now. There's work by many organizations to create a decentralized personal identity or a self-sovereign identity. So I've even heard the vision described as identity as a public utility. So one idea is that it would enable individuals to store identity data on a personal device and provide it to validators rather than having the data in a central repository. And the way that this then becomes valid is through some of those blockchain technologies we were talking about. All right, another future challenge we would have is the governance of this type of a network. As you can imagine, there would have to be technical governance so all of these networks can talk together and exchange information securely. And then functional governance too. So if it's permissioned, who do we let in? Who gets to be part of the learning network? And when I say we, I don't mean ASU. I mean, this needs to be, and we envision it as an entity that that governs that through participation of other groups. So some of the things that we would need to work out are some of those principles, concerns, and actors related to having a network like this. How do you make sure that everyone who comes in is a good actor, whether that's technical capabilities and as well as integrity. And the last thing I want to share, for me, this was one of the last in-person events I got to attend. I know some of you were there as well, the TLN Unconference in 2020. So as we work to build this network, we already have a lot of collaborators across the nation and others who are interested in very similar work. We had over 70 representatives from over 70 organizations come together, and we focused our conversations and questions around this vision and this project on topics like learner empowerment, digital identity, privacy, governance, the value proposition to employers, so how this could be beneficial to the job market, and then also the impact on education institutions. So lots of conversation around it, and I see that there have been some comments in chat. I don't know if those are questions that are coming up, I imagine, because we there are definitely a lot of questions about what this may look like in the future.
Well, everyone certainly loves the idea of Whoness. That has been very popular in the chat. And one of the other questions that has come up is around working backwards and credentialing backwards for things that have already been awarded, but might not be on the record yet. And so what are your thoughts on that?
Right, so so the idea with the TLN is that it wouldn't just record things that are earned from the moment of inception, but so for the example of ASU, with our partner with Maricopa Community College, we have students who have consented from the time they joined ASU to share that data back with Maricopa for the purpose of reverse transfer. So because ASU has those learning credentials, then we're able to share them via the TLN currently because they were already recorded somewhere else. I think that, yeah, so so it depends on the data that the institution has that joins.
Fantastic. And that TLN event was so helpful. There were such great conversations there. Recordings that people could go see those. I don't remember.
It was live and in person. So
yeah.
So we had
we didn't do that then.
Right. We had the visual recorder. So this the slide I shared with the image was our visual recorder's adaptation of that. And then also there was a write-up done after the event that I can share in our channel because there's some additional context and information there.
Fantastic. What other questions do we have out there? We're back on the who's. Kath, you have your hand raised. Do you have a question? Maybe not. Maybe it's from earlier. Well, chime in, let us know if you do. Does TLN have a section?
I'm sorry, do they have a
connection?
Allison, you're breaking up. The question is, does the TLN have a Slack connection? So would you be able to share in Slack?
Yes, there is a Slack community for that. So I'll share that as well. Great question.
All right, any other thoughts or questions for Michelle? Or am I still breaking up?
You're good now, Allison.
Would the TLN help connect different badging organizations like Credly and Badger?
That is part of the vision. So that's why just like Badger has been created to comply with the Open Badges standard, that standard and the comprehensive learning record standard are some that we're working on aligning with so that there is interoperability, because ultimately this may be a network of networks if we're really going to be meeting students in all the places they're earning credentials.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. That was so informative and helpful to understand what this is. And I shared Michelle's presentation in the chat. And so our next speaker doesn't seem to be in the room yet. So this might be a good time to break off and have some conversations about all the amazing things we just heard. So we will bring you back when Wayne arrives, and happy chatting, everyone. So we have Wayne Skipper here with us, CEO of Student-Centric, and I'll let you introduce yourself, Wayne, and take it away. But we're very excited that you're here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me. So gotta say, I love the pet backgrounds. That's awesome.
It's an adorable pet contest day.
Oh, I see. I hope there's a badge for that.
Oh, there is now.
Yeah. So hi, everybody. I see a lot of familiar names here. So nice to catch up with everybody. So for those that don't know me, I'm Wayne Skipper, founder and CEO of Concentric Sky. My background is in engineering. So I spent most of my career doing hardware engineering, and I used to lead the engineering team at Dell back before the .com crash. And since then, I've mainly been doing software. And so I have a background as a software architect as well as a hardware architect. And I lead a team of about 90 people, and we like to solve interesting engineering problems. And so we build everything from analytics systems that handle 1 trillion records a day in real time, which isn't just big data, it's crazy big data. We build award-winning UX and UI. We built the app for Encyclopedia Britannica that allowed them to stop printing the paper encyclopedia for the first time in 200 years. They actually gave me a copy of the 1911, which is kind of like their, that's the version where Einstein wrote the article on physics and Curie wrote the article on chemistry. So it's just like, it's the best one, So I have that in our offices, and hopefully, I know some of you have seen it. But in general, we just like solving interesting technology problems. And we got into the digital credentialing and digital badging space in 2014 when we were approached by the MacArthur Foundation to write a technology standard to really take their digital badging efforts to the next level, to make it suitable for verifiable credentials, for high stakes credentials in higher ed. And so I guess the first thing to know about us and digital badges is that we didn't just implement the standard, we wrote it. We wrote the standard, we wrote the developer's guide, we wrote and open sourced all of the developers' tools, the certification tests, and we handed all of that information and all of that stuff over to a global standards body called IMS Global at the beginning of 2017. And we still lead the work on those standards under that standards body now. But we've written a number of other technology standards in the space, which really aim to sort of fulfill the original vision of what we're trying to do with open badges. So before I go too far down that tangent, I realize I've kind of meandered from introducing myself to kind of talking about digital badges. Is that what you want me to do, Allison? Or was there a specific thing you wanted me to cover?
Sure. I mean, wherever you want to meander is very helpful for the group. But we've been looking a lot at Badger this week and talking about possible digital credential implementations. And we heard from the Xplor group and Michelle with the TLN this morning. And so I guess kind of, you were heading into the history, and then kind of where do you see it going in the future?
Yeah, let me then, if I may, kind of briefly touch on sort of the technology landscape that Badger operates in so that you can understand what it does, because it's not immediately obvious from the surface. And then we can kind of talk about new directions. Is it possible for me to share my screen? Oh, lovely. Okay, so this will be familiar to a lot of folks, but I just kind of want to cover this because it'll help make sense of where the space is and where we're going. So, as I said, we wrote Open Badges 2.0, and I like to cover two things when I talk about digital badges. The first is that it is not a digital sticker, right? A lot of people get hung up on what it looks like or the word badges, but those things are irrelevant. The reason that it takes the form of an image format is that what we did is we took the SVG and PNG file formats and we wrote an encrypted data standard, and the data is shoved into the image file, right? The image, the picture is irrelevant, really, except for, people see the image and they move it around. The reason that we did this is that this allows us to upload credentials, download credentials, attach them to emails, put them on websites, all the things you can do with images without having to get everybody else in the world to go adopt new standards or implement new software. That's why it's an image. The image is the vehicle by which this encrypted data payload travels the world, right? So that's the first thing to understand, is that the image file itself, while we want them to be pretty, that's really not the magic, right? The magic is the data that's encrypted and shoved inside of it. Second thing I like to talk about when I talk about digital badges is that the role of the badge has never really been to sort of add on to the ontology of credentials. So for example, you have degrees and diplomas and certificates and certifications, and a lot of educators think, great, badges, throw them on the pile, right? I'll find something to badge a skill maybe, or gamify my course or something. But really the role of the Open Badges standard is to serve as a machine readable syntax. It's like a file format that you can use to express any form of credential, right? So that certification, that certificate, that degree, all of those things can now be expressed in a common machine readable way. That's what they're for, right? So those are the key things to understand, is that, you know, you don't have to think about a badge as like a new thing you have to work with. It's a way of encapsulating the things you already work with so that they are computable and structurable. And making things computable and structurable adds a tremendous amount of value to everybody in the ecosystem. So the original vision that we had with Mozilla and MacArthur was that now we can take a learning achievement of any level of granularity, and now they're in the same syntax. So you can have academic credentials, professional certifications, on-the-job training, volunteer work, etc. Those things now, because they're all in the same syntax, they can flow through a central service. And this service was originally called the Mozilla Backpack. And Mozilla wrote this as a way to give learners control of those credentials, right? So the learner can pull their credentials from academic settings, etc., into a central space that the learner controls. And then the learner at their discretion can share them out into e-portfolios, use them for job opportunities, build personal brands on social media, etc. So this was the original landscape of the Open Badges ecosystem. And as of last year, Mozilla has given this role to Concentric Sky and to Badger. So the way I describe this is that this means that Badger isn't just a product, Badger is infrastructure. This isn't something that some other company can go and build. This is a role that Mozilla has given to us. And I think it says a lot about our engineering ability and our values that they would do this. It's the only time they've given an initiative to a private for-profit company. And we think that says a lot. But this is what Badger does in the world, right? It gives us this unique perspective of all the credentials that a learner has from a lot of different sources. A lot of badging products are really focused on what they do. We're focused on what everybody does. Every LMS, every badging product, everything that emits open badges into the world, the vast majority of those flow through our systems. And this gives us a unique perspective on what learners are doing across a wide array of institutional settings, right? We can show you what credentials learners are getting from other places, right? And that's something unique to what we can do. So, you know, back in 2015, I talked about how our background is engineering. We're not a product company per se. We like to solve problems. So when MacArthur and Mozilla asked us to solve this problem, we realized there was a missing piece. And that missing piece was a way of understanding what a badge was, right? As you move it from one, or not a badge, but like a credential, as you move it from one setting to another, right? You have to understand what somebody does to earn the credential and what they're expected to do with that credential once they have it. So we wrote another standard called Badger or Open Pathways, and implemented it in our product called Badger Pathways. And what this allows us to do is to take these stackable learning achievements, these badges from any platform, like a Moodle badge, a Badger badge, a D2L badge, any badging platform, any level of granularity, and then put these into a system of meaning, which is also a data structure. And this sort of system of meaning is often called a competency framework or a curriculum, right? And this allows us to build these data structures that are computable, which gives us a lot of value. What I mean by that is that, for example, if a learner has this badge, and say this badge is an industry certification, I can show that learner every pathway in the world that includes that badge, just because they have it, right? So you got your industry certification, that's lovely. I can show you all the community colleges that are participating anyway, right? That have built that into programs, right? And that is extraordinarily powerful for a learner because it solves what I think of as the essential question of digital badges, which is why would anybody want one? Like, what good is a badge to a learner, right? Why do we want to give them? And so the failing, I think, of a lot of approaches to badging is that the answer to that question is, well, go share it on social media. Our work is done. See, go make use of it. I don't personally think of that as a particularly compelling use of digital credentials, given the underlying technologies. And so these pathways, we call them stackable because they begin with badges and they end with badges. And that means that the badge that ends one pathway can begin another pathway, both inside of your institution or across institutional boundaries. So for example, this might be an AP badge that's part of a transfer pathway into a 2-year college, or a 2-year CTE credential that articulates into a 4-year college. Or this could be a CE credential offered to a professional that then becomes part of an employer training pathway. And these are all real world use cases for us. I didn't say at the beginning, but Badger has a user base of about 20,000 organizations, 20 million users spanning 140 countries. So I have 8,000 organizations that are creating pathways, which is a fair amount. Not really representative of all the pathways out there, but enough to have a critical mass of what we can show people. And so, this pathway represents kind of like the idealized course structure or the idealized map of what somebody might do. But the individual's progress through this at any given point in time, that snapshot is what we think of as a digital transcript, right? And so again, our focus isn't just on building products. Our focus is on writing the technology standards that allow us to build this, what we think of as like future internet of education, right? My personal goal is to build technology that will withstand the test of time, right? I don't think that I will be successful unless people are still using this technology 50 years from today, right? And so I draw my inspiration from Vint Cerf and Tim Berners-Lee, the creators of the internet. And I think the internet has been so successful because it was not designed to make money, right? It was designed by engineers, for the purposes of moving information around in kind of a pure way, right? Nobody thought, how am I going to make money with this TCP/IP thing? Wasn't even a consideration, right? And that's why it works. And upon that public infrastructure, we can build this competitive marketplace. And competition is good, let's have it. But we need to make sure that the infrastructure is open and ideally publicly controlled. And that's what we're trying to do with these technology standards. And that's why we write standards rather than just building products. Or I could just build Badger pathways and say, oh, look, I have a nifty thing, go buy it. But instead what we did is, here is the way that we can all participate in this ecosystem. Look, we've done a particularly beautiful implementation of it. So the same way we did that with badges, we've done that with pathways. And now that's what we're doing with these digital transcripts. So the learner's progress at any point in time is their transcript across organizational boundaries. And then this gives rise to this idea that a transcript is now a computable object and no longer lives in a traditional silo. So this is no longer just a high school transcript, just a 2-year, 4-year college transcript, just an employer training record, right? So these things can now be added together in service of the learner. In the same way we've quantified achievements, now we've quantified learning journeys, now we've quantified the records of those journeys, right? And it's all about creating these machine readable syntaxes that are useful for the application of AI and machine learning, right? It's all setting the stage for the future, right? For the sorts of predictions we can make to better serve learners and all stakeholders. So then the question arises, if this is no longer a high school transcript, a 2-year, 4-year college transcript, an employer training record, well, where does it live and who owns it, right? And so, we have a philosophy for the answer to those questions, which is actually in great alignment with Arizona State. So we think that the way this should be stored is in a decentralized system, and that the record should actually be owned by the learner. And this is something that we proposed last year as a technology standard called EdRec. And we have worked with Salesforce and your TLN team to create as the trusted learner network. So, blockchain is a tricky beast, as it were. A lot of people like to wave the word blockchain around as if it in itself solves problems, right? A blockchain is basically just a database, right? It's just a different way of storing data. Don't have enough time to dig into blockchain, but I wrote an article for EDUCAUSE that you can find on the internet called "Is Blockchain Ready for Prime Time in Education?" Guess the answer. No. No, it is not. But there's a right way to use it, right? And that article is from last year. There wasn't a way to do it then, but there is now, which is the Trusted Learner Network, which is what I think of as the right architecture for building these sorts of systems that allow us to accomplish these future goals for the learner. So now we have this record stored in a decentralized way, which I recognize is ironic because it's at the center of my image here, but bear with me. So we have this decentralized storage mechanism, and then the problem we have is, well, now we need to understand, as organizations read and write from this, how we map the information from one to another. Right, so you look at, say, an employer here who wants to hire somebody with a communication skill or, say, critical thinking skill. And then the institution can say, well, everybody here leaves with critical thinking. We build it into every course, obviously, that we taught them critical thinking. I mean, come on, right? But, a badge can then serve as a vehicle by which a learner can see critical thinking as an individual thing they learned, so they can then better articulate it to that employer, right? So that's a use for a badge in and of itself. And there's a lot of work around 21st century skills and marketable skills badges solely for that purpose. But the real problem fundamentally is that we need to map our student learning outcomes to the competency needs of employers. Well, it turns out that's the same problem we have when we're looking at transfers, and the same problem we have when we're looking at admissions in the first place, the need to map the outcomes of one institution to the needs of another. And so this is where it starts to get interesting, but it hasn't been interesting so far. So the answer to this is what we call skills mapping, right? And the idea is that the keyword communication here is an insufficient marker for what this skill is. Because a lot of organizations, they'll scrape a bunch of job boards, they'll scrape a bunch of resumes, and they'll say, oh, look, I can match communication. Those must be the same thing, right? Except that they're not, because we know that the communication skills needed for a nurse are different than the communication skills needed for an engineer, or different than the communication skills needed for a designer, right? There's some sub-competencies there, but those are actually different things. And so being good engineers, writing technology standards, we've created one that solves this problem as well. And the way that we think about this is that communication is just a label, right? So you might call it communication, another institution might call it oral/written communication, another institution might be speaking Spanish and call it comunicación. Doesn't matter, because rather than thinking about this as a skill, we think about a unique identifier, and this is just a label, right? So now we can say, it doesn't matter what we call it, this is what we're talking about. And being good engineers, rather than just coming up with some random unique identifier, we've made it in the form of a web address, because those are unique. And that means we can render it in a browser and we can show additional information, like how is this assessed? What's the rubric for mastery, right? And this allows us to solve what I think of as the critical problem here, this mapping. Because now an employer can say, I'm looking for somebody with this competency. Doesn't matter what I'm calling it, doesn't matter what you call it, right? I'm looking for this competency, assessed this way. And I'm looking for an individual that has a 3 out of 5 on this rubric. And an institution can say, I have given somebody a credential for this competency. Doesn't matter what I call it, right? This competency, I've assessed them this way. And this individual has a 4 out of 5 on this rubric. Here's the evidence. And that's what digital badges are for, right? They package that evidence as you move it in between these institutional settings. And that's why they're so valuable. So I realize that I'm kind of over time and I want to be respectful. So I'll pause there and check in with our fair leaders. You want me to, well, yeah.
I think you're doing great.
Okay.
We're together as a group until 10:30. Toby says he loves this. So I think, Heather?
Yeah, I was going to say that I think, Wayne, what you've done, knowingly or unknowingly, is basically connected all of the different pieces of the entire summit together. From the use of a badge through the need for an open taxonomy, with the TLN in the squeeze there in the middle. So I think that you basically, whether knowingly or not, just tied it all into a really nice bow.
And
Serendipity.
everybody wants you to continue.
Oh, lovely.
Yes.
Okay. Happy to keep going. So, yeah, so then let's see, kind of next thing I'll cover is this guy, right? So kind of the last mile of this space is what we call competency-based hiring. So, you know, in our thinking, competency-based education has had the education sector pushing on a string, right? We know that, you know, measures of seat time are insufficient, right? So we describe the vehicles we use to measure those and the time it takes to get them, 2-year degree, 4-year degree. But that doesn't tell employers what they want to know, right? I'm an employer, and what I want to know is not how long somebody spent navigating a bureaucracy. That's helpful to me. What I want to know is what can they do and how good are they at it, right? That's what matters to me. And the degree is kind of a crude proxy for that, right? And this is why we have to do so much testing and interviewing of people, because we have to go figure out, well, what do these people know? Sure, you have a degree in computer science, but did you learn what I need you to know, right? And so this has been recognized with competency-based education, where educators are thinking, well, okay, now we'll start talking not just about seat time and what somebody's done and, you know, the process they went through, but we'll actually start trying to create these representations of what people know and how good they are at it, because that's what employers want. And that's lovely, except that employers haven't been really well suited to handle receiving that information. That's why I call it pushing on a string, right? Because employers are still, you know, like having these disconnects between the team that does the work and the team that does the hiring, right? And so it's hard for people to actually understand exactly what it is that's needed. And so what we've been doing is working with the US Chamber of Commerce Foundation to create something called the Job Data Exchange. And what this does is it's an employer-led initiative, and we have all of the Fortune 50 companies involved. And that's what I like about it the most, is that it's not educators or educational institutions saying to employers, hey, go figure stuff out, right? It's employers saying, hey, we're going to pull on that string, right? And what it does is it allows an employer to create a competency-based job description, but not keywords, URIs, right? And that's how we tie it together and build it into applicant tracking systems. And this is what we think of as the future of work, right? So a lot of people throw around the term future of work, meaning whatever they want. When we use the term future of work, this is what we mean. This end-to-end ecosystem by which we can quantify learning in these portable packages that align to skills taxonomies in a way that employers can identify exactly what they want and move people through this system, right? At scale, globally, right? That's the future of work, is these systems connected. And so I think of this as really the last mile of that ecosystem, right? This is how we're going to benefit the learners. And so fortunately for everybody, all this stuff is figured out, right? We have the badging standard, we have the pathway standard, we have standards for competency frameworks, we have JDX, all that's underway, right? So none of those are problems that you have to solve. But the problem to be solved is this, which I think of as the biggest problem in education, right? Is that somebody needs to go and build the skills maps. Because a lot of organizations, engineering organizations, they'll think that they can use machine learning to figure out what communication means, right? They'll say, oh, I'll go scrape the job posting, or I'll go look at the sentence around it, or I'll go look at a syllabus, right? Where the word communication appears, and that'll tell me what communication means. Except it doesn't, because those signals aren't there. It's a waste of time to try to look at the sentences around communication to understand what it means. What you need is a subject matter expert to come in and say, this is what communication is. This is how we're assessing it and why. This is the rubric that we use to assess it. Here you go, right? And there's no possible way to build that with machine learning, right? People have tried. I think it's a fool's errand. You just can't do it. You need the subject matter experts to use their expertise to produce the data structures that the machines need, right? And this is the Open Taxonomy Project, right? And this is what, you can find out some information at opentaxonomy.org. I did kind of a tour earlier this year to find funding for this, because I was trying to build it as a set of open source tools rather than a product. And that's just my personal philosophy, is I don't want to go sell stuff to people. Like I have a team of 90, we don't have any salespeople, right? Our philosophy is kind of this shining city on the hill philosophy. Like we'll do something that's really cool and we'll talk to the people that come to appreciate it. And those are our people, right? So we'll make the beautiful thing. Everybody's like, wow, that's cool. And that's kind of our philosophy, rather than like, let's go do a bunch of marketing trying to convince. Anyway, we're just, you know, it's a different philosophy that is kind of unique to our organization, because, you know, we've never accepted any investment, right? So we don't have investors to please. I don't have a runway by which, if I don't, you know, make a certain amount of money, then, you know, we're out of business. I don't have to go make some investor a 10x, you know, on the money they've given. And this is what gives us the freedom to think this way, and also to focus on open infrastructure and what makes us unique as an organization. So the big problem that we have to solve is that we have to find a way of convincing faculty of the value of doing this work, right? The knowledge is in their heads, right? We need the subject matter experts to do this work. Well, the problem right now is that I can talk about URIs, right, and things like that, but, you know, they don't care about that, right? That doesn't communicate to them. That's not their language, right? So what we have to do is we have to make it easy for them, right? People are busy, right? They can see the value of this. Well, you have to lower the bar for them. And so what the Open Taxonomy Project aims to do is to create some really easy to use tools so that a subject matter expert can align student learning outcomes to skills. And that's it. That's the work to be done. It's almost, you could call it data entry if you wanted to trivialize it, right? But really, we need the subject matter experts to get their knowledge into a computable format so the machines can do their magic, right? And that's the current work of today, skills mapping, right? And so I'll pause there. But that's really our big focus right now, is on helping people to do the skills mapping, because all of the plumbing, as it were, is there, or I'll say wiring. Now we just have to turn on the lights, and that's what skills mapping does.
Super exciting, Wayne. And I think you literally then hit on all the things that we have been hitting on, and encouraging ASU as the next step is really to start doing some of that skills mapping, for people to start working with their faculty to start skills mapping. We've even had conversations about the best ways for people to sort of sell skill mapping to their faculty in order to get them on board with some of these processes. So those have all been discussions that we've been having over the course of the summit.
Awesome. Great minds, I'll say.
Yeah, this is really the perfect wrap up for the week. And I think we're all super excited to move forward. And that was just wonderful. Getting some thank yous in the chat.
And Allison, if you want to toss the form to sign up to do the skills mapping meta competencies piece again, because I think that this is a perfect call to action for that piece, which would be the next step in the Learning Futures Collaboratory, is to work on some of that open skills work.
Absolutely. And we're very interested in helping to facilitate that work however we can. And yeah, it's all really exciting stuff, right? What I like about it is that it's not just theory, that enough time has kind of gone into this that we're ready to do the interesting work. Well, interesting for educators work, right? Of like taking all that valuable knowledge and making it useful for these kinds of predictions. So
awesome. Thanks, Wayne. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
My pleasure. So I think my time is up. I will sign off. So thank you everyone very much. Really appreciate it, and have fun with the rest of the summit.
Well, we're done. This is it.
Oh, this is it.
This is it. This is the end.
Oh,
you are the grand finale.
Oh, that's so lovely. Thank you. Well, I'm glad it tied things together so well then. It sounds like it was a good set of ideas.
Yes. Yes, and so the form to join the skills mapping is in the chat. The form to earn your credential for the day is in the chat. I've been writing down a list of the adorable pets and folks that will now be earning the adorable pet digital credential summit credential. And yes, let's have a final pet sign off. Thank you all for joining us this week, and I hope we can continue these conversations.
Thank you all. We're so happy you came and joined us this week, and we can't wait to work with you in the future.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.